Hello, I'm Faith, and welcome to Faith's Take, where I talk about anything and everything that I find interesting. And welcome to my review of Thor Ragnarok. And before we get into that, though, thank you all so much. I just hit 500 subscribers on Sunday, which is just amazing. I woke up Sunday morning and finally saw the 500, and I'd been hanging around the 480s for a while, so I'm glad that I finally, we finally pushed past that, and just thank you guys so much. And I know that you hear this from every YouTuber, I'm sure, but it is amazing that there are actually 500 people, 500 individuals exist who actually not only, enjoyed my video enough to obviously watch at least one until the end, but enough to actually want to continue to see them. So thank you very much. I will actually be putting up an announcement for a Q&A video soon for that. You can hold your questions until that I'll have an announcement video for it first, but my family's going on vacation soon, so it'll probably be right after that. Thank you all so much, but let's get into this review, which is gonna be both a Thor Ragnarok review, which the first part is gonna be non-spoiler, it'll just be like general thoughts. Spoiler with some stuff, but then also at some point, maybe even throughout, we'll be getting into some Age of Ultron rants, because it doesn't majorly affect this film, but it's affected a character within this film a lot, and I've got some things to say about Age of Ultron in general. So but we'll get there when we get there. So let's start at the beginning. My family actually saw this on Saturday night. We had pre-ordered our tickets and everything. We saw the late night showing, and had just a grand old time seeing it. And I took it's Monday night currently recording this, and I took 2 days to process, because a lot happens. A lot of characters are introduced, a lot of characters are developed, a lot of plot things happened that were affected by previous movies to a certain extent, not to the way Civil War was affected by things, but affected to some extent, and then a lot of things that weren't touched upon at all, and I was really surprised. So let's start at the very beginning with Thor himself. So good, very good. Chris Hemsworth has just knocked it out of the park with this one and with his performance. Because it's if you watch the first Thor, it's a little rough, but it's he didn't have anything to work with though. It's a boring, bland script. He had nothing to work with. But it seems like every single movie he's in, except Age of Ultron, because he had nothing to do, but every other movie he's in, he gets way better, which is just great. I think by Thor 2 he was really good, but in this one he's just fun and quirky. And what I really appreciate about Thor the characters, we have so many of our heroes that have, granted, they've all been through a lot, and as we've seen even with the Guardians, they'll have these tragic backstories and past and have done bad things themselves, and they have to live with that and learn to move on with it. But with Thor, it's he doesn't dwell on the negative things for too long, at least not at once. He still tries to be an optimistic character and move on, and it seems, at least to the audience, pretty effortless most of the time. It's which I think is good. I think it's if you watch the Avengers, he's still pretty much happy-go-lucky Thor, even though it's his own brother. When he's talking to Loki in that movie, he's obviously very upset by what he's doing and just wants his brother back, but when he's with everyone else, he's still happy Thor, who's a little more upbeat and ready for battle than the rest of them. So I do appreciate that in him as a character, and he definitely has that here, where he overall still tries to look on the bright side and laugh at things and just enjoy things. I think something that sums up his character perfectly, was in all the trailers, is when you have the the gladiator scene, and he sees the Hulk bust out of the side, and he's like, yes! And I love that part. And he's so excited just to see the Hulk there. He's he's a friend from work, and I love that. And it really sums up, because any other of the Marvel heroes would have been oh no, what happened? How did he get here? What have they done to him? But Thor's just I know that guy. I love that. I think that's amazing. And I think that helps sum up, that part of Thor's character really well. But he's also grown as a character. He gets a little smarter with each movie as well. I think Thor, it's not even so much he was ever stupid, more just naive, not just to earthly things, but even to just people in general. But now it's he's sharper when it comes to Loki and his tricks. He can see more what Loki's gonna do now. And while Loki, on the other hand, obviously hasn't really grown, or at least hasn't expected Thor to grow in the way he has, which is a very interesting like addition to their dynamic. But speaking of Loki, Tom Hiddleston, fantastic, just perfect as always in this role. And I know it's the whole irony thing of like, oh, he's such a nice, sweet guy in real life, but he plays this like, really intimidating character very well, and he does. Like, he's so good, and he brings a lot of the comedy in this movie, because it's a very funny movie, like everyone's been saying. I'd put it in between probably the two Guardians movies for me, comedy wise. Better than the second Guardians, not quite as good as the first. For me personally, but somewhere in there. And Loki's a big part of that, which I think we all assumed he would be. He's in a lot of the movie, which I was happy about, because it's the kind of thing where he's in like 2 scenes in the trailer, like the gladiator scene and like 1 or 2 other shots maybe. And with that, I was like, are those his only scenes in the film? How much does he actually get? He's in a good portion of it. He's a lead character, which I was very happy about. Especially just because, I mean, he was supposed to have a cameo in Age of Ultron, and they cut it out for like no reason. So it's just, this is the first time we've seen him on screen in like 4 years. So it was really cool to see him back. And let's see, who should we get into next? Let's get into the story a little bit. So the main story is that Thor and Loki get caught up in this old Asgardian villain, Hela, the goddess of death, coming in, and she wants to, destroy Asgard and all their people and just, reign supreme as their queen. And at the same time, Thor needs to prevent Ragnarok, which is like the apocalypse for Asgard, from happening. And then in the midst of this, Thor gets sent to that planet where Jeff Goldblum is the leader and the Hulk is, and that's where the gladiator stuff is, and they need to find a way to get back to Asgard to stop Hela from doing all those terrible things. And it's really, that's just like a super brief summary, but it's really good, and it's really fun just as a whole. The plot is they take it in such fun directions. Like I said, Thor being an upbeat character I think really helps keep it light. It's kind of in the same vein with like Ant-Man, is like overall they're pretty bright characters, and so that you can enjoy, even when something gets kind of heavy, it's never too heavy with them most of the time, and it usually is a pretty quick scene and you move on. Actually, with both of them, now that I think about it, the heavy scenes in their movies usually come from other characters' heavy scenes, and they just kind of react to it, and that's kind of the case here, which we'll get into in a little bit. But this whole thing is just, it's really fun. The plot points, there's a twist in the first act, which I thought was very interesting, which we'll probably talk about in the spoiler part here in a few minutes. But like, for any movie to do a twist in the first act that I had not seen. Now granted, we saw it the second day it was out, and I avoided any reviews. Like, I checked to see, like, what it was getting, like, points-wise, like, IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes and stuff, but I didn't read any reviews, I didn't watch any, like, YouTube reviews. I wanted to go in as fresh as possible, because I was like, if there's gonna be, like, a fun major twist or something before Infinity War, this would be it. It's not necessarily something that'll affect Infinity War at all, not really, but it was very interesting. It really affects the Thor Ragnarok movie, and it was very, very interesting to me. But with that, let's get into the other characters a little bit. So I talked about kind of our 2 leads and the basic plot. So Hela is a very good villain. It's nice to have another good Marvel villain. We got 2 in a row this year, guys. 2, because we had the Vulture in Spider-Man, and now we have Hela in this one. And Ego was pretty good. He was definitely in the middle to higher end of the pack for Marvel villains for sure. In Guardians Volume 2 earlier this year. So that's pretty steady villains this year, which is really good. It's major improvements for Marvel in that regard over like the first phase and things like that. So, and even a lot of the second. So that's good. Let's keep moving forward with the villains. Cate Blanchett just does such a good job, because she is like completely shameless and just like completely overboard as this villain, like chewing the scenery, but it makes sense. It's like she's the goddess of death, can do and say whatever she wants, and so she goes kind of just over the top, but in like a really enjoyable way. It fits the tone of the movie. It fitting over the top, not an over the top where you're like annoyed by it or kind of like weirded out and you're like, this doesn't make sense with what they're doing with this character, with this movie. It makes total sense in context, especially. So it's very, very good. She just plays it so well, and it's I mean, it's you look at that costume and you might be like, oh my man, that's a crazy helmet, but she wears it well, so it all works in the movie. And when we're talking about like villains and over the top performances, let's go to Jeff Goldblum. So when I saw the first trailer for this movie, and he's only in like one or two shots, like when he has his first shot in the trailer, I got super excited because I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be amazing. Just the way he was, like the look on his face, the way he was dressed, I was like, Jeff Goldblum in Thor movie, this is gonna be hilarious, just because it's Jeff Goldblum and he's just so weird as it is, but when you let him play weird, he's so good. And that's the case here, because I think a lot of people see Jeff Goldblum and you're either excited or you're like, ugh, like really disappointed. And I think the disappointed people, I'm like, you're thinking of, you know, The Lost World and the Independence Day movies and things like that, but it's like, you gotta remember the original Jurassic Park, like when he plays a quirky non-lead, he like makes those scenes he's in, and that's definitely the case here, because he got to, again, play up. It's, someone put it, is like, it's almost like because I've seen reviews now, it's almost like Jeff Goldblum playing this character, and I was like, yeah, because it's so Jeff Goldblum, but it's hilarious, and it works so well. And he brings a lot of the humor in the scenes that he is in. But everyone, you know, brings their humor to the table. But I was super excited for his performance. I'm like, please let him just be like Jeff Goldblum in this movie. Don't try, if you can even underplay Jeff Goldblum. I don't know if you can, but I was like, don't try to make him act normal. Like, let him do his Jeff Goldblum thing, and they did, which just worked incredibly well, especially for the, you know, the character he was playing and the planet they were on at the time. It just, quirky and weird makes total sense. Again, just like with Hella being over the top, him being over the top works completely well in the context of their character in the film, for sure. Next we have Valkyrie, who I was not worried about, but I was like least excited about when it came to the main characters in this, because I was just like, you know, how they're gonna play her. Is she gonna be just like a bland, strong warrior woman, you know, or is she gonna be like just comedic, really? Like, how exactly are they gonna play this? And she is a warrior, but she is really funny. And what I loved was the opening scene with her. At first you're thinking, oh, she's coming out and it's gonna be like all cool and she's gonna be all tough or whatever, and I'm like, as long as she's likable, fine, just because we see that a lot with these movies, with just like superhero and action movies in general, with the strong female characters, the stoic female characters. But then it opens with a joke, and then it's like her main thing in the movie is that she's like an alcoholic, and I was just like, that's a great twist and like weird quirk to give her, like, not twist, but you know what I mean, like a twist on the trope of the strong female like warrior character. And it made her much more interesting and added depth to her backstory and what had happened to her. And I thought that was really, really good and really interesting, because I'm gonna get to also around the spoiler talk stuff, how this movie really envelops how much better Marvel has gotten at writing several different character archetypes. And one is the strong female hero. They've gotten better and better as time has gone on with these, and I think this really was, because they made her flawed, and they made her, you know, kind of weird and quirky, like they should be, like all the heroes should be to a certain extent. And so that really worked. She really worked for me really, really well. She was capable, but she was also funny, and I'm like, good, you had that good balance in there. And she had a really good backstory. The Hulk would be the last one here. The Hulk / Bruce Banner, who it just, like I said, there's gonna be some Age of Ultron rants in this. Age of Ultron really, really wrecked that character. In the first Avengers movie, he's my favorite. Bruce Banner is my favorite character in the Avengers, in that first, group film, because I thought he had the most interesting story, was brilliantly played, and he was the one I expected the least from, because I was like, we have seen two different Hulk actors in the past, at the time, less than 10 years. You had the terrible Ang Lee movie from 2003, which is not connected to this at all. And then you had the 2008 or 9, 8 or 9 movie with Ed Norton, who then didn't do what he was supposed to be doing, and so he got fired, and then they hired Mark Ruffalo. So I'm like, they're on the third actor. That movie, The Incredible Hulk, was supposed to be a part of this universe, and they kind of sweep it under the rug. It's just like, we don't talk about that one anymore. He doesn't look the same. And so he was the guy I was like, this is the third time with this guy. Who cares at this point? I'm in it for the other characters. But he's brilliant in that movie, because they played it really well, where he is just this mild-mannered, in a good way, scientist. It could have been extremely cliched, almost to the point of either annoyance or complete boredom, but I think Ruffalo really knows how to play it as charismatic as you can play a role like that in that movie, without it being over the top or out of character. And yes, he does brood a lot, and like every few minutes he has to make some kind of reference to how he's the Hulk. But I will say, that's gotta be really hard to cope with, especially because like he did it to himself, which is like, dang, like that's gotta hurt, man. And I think what also really got me was how far they took it, because Avengers overall, especially if you look at it compared to like almost every movie since then, one of the absolute lightest of the movies. There, again, are dark elements in it, but one of the darkest by far is when he says, like, I have tried to kill myself, and it doesn't work. Like, it's like, jeez, like, we're just jumping right into attempted suicide with this. And I just found his character fascinating. And I was like, that's a really good, deep character to have in a world that already has some good and deep characters in it. But then it's like Age of Ultron, like, took everything away. It just looks like he is nothing in that movie but a plot device. They made sure in Avengers that there was a reason he was there, that there was a reason for him to be there in the first place. Like, why does S.H.I.E.L.D. even need him at all? And then there were reasons for him to, become the Hulk within the story that benefited the Avengers and the team, near the end when they need, the Hulk to destroy things. And, he saves Iron Man's life at the very end. It's like, he did important things in the movie that were obviously planned out to be positive. But Age of Ultron, he's literally just a pawn to be manipulated and used and to enable other characters' stories. But I just wanted you guys to know how I feel about the character before going into this. In the film itself, the Hulk, he can talk now, like pretty much full sentences, close enough, and wants to stay the Hulk, which I was like, that's interesting. Bruce is really oddly handled in this, because not I don't want to say terrible, because with the tone of this film, it's fine. But if you look at Bruce as a character through the movies, through all of them, it's a little weird, because it's like, oh my gosh, he's been the Hulk for 2 years. They talk about it for like maybe 3 minutes, and that's like completely dropped. It's like not really mentioned much again. And so it's like, oh, okay. But he's really weird. Like, he acts very different. And my mom and I were talking about this earlier, because she actually was like, we were getting into this in general, and she was like, did he seem weird to you? I was like, yes, he seems very off. Where, like I said, in the Avengers, he was just like this mild-mannered, kind of broody scientist, and in Ultron, he doesn't really have his own personality. But in this, he was like, it seems like he was playing it up for comedy. I don't know if this was his idea, or Mark Ruffalo's idea, if this was the director's idea, if this was writers, Kevin Feige, who this would have been. But he's kind of wide-eyed through the whole thing. He's very innocent, but it's off, because he wasn't like that before. And at first I thought it was him coming out of being the Hulk for a while. Like, maybe he was just like, his brain's trying to come to terms with everything that's happened. But he's like that through the rest of the movie. Once they were kind of like the end of the second act going into the third, I thought he would kind of, like, he says something about, like, he's like, oh, that looks like a collapsing neutron star or something. And I was like, oh, okay, so we're getting, like, smart Bruce back. That's, like, the only smart thing he says in the rest of the movie. Like, they don't even use his intelligence that much, which I'm like, okay, fine, but then it's like, well, did he really need to be Bruce at all then? It's like, I liked Bruce as a character. It really seems like the Hulk is only in this movie to explain why he wasn't in Civil War. Because I mean, he kind of helps Thor get away. Basically, like, the Hulk could have kind of been written out. Now, it would have been less fun. Like, the Gladiator stadium scene is amazing. The action in this movie, the whole movie, by the way, the action is fantastic. The action in these movies just keeps getting better. It's like just through the whole thing between like Thor and Hulk and, you know, Valkyrie and Hela and everyone. It is so good. And a lot of the fun of that would have been taken away if the Hulk wasn't in it. But story-wise and character-wise, he does not need to be in it. Doesn't seem like Bruce really grew that much as a character, if at all. He doesn't really have an arc. And I'm like, okay, I mean, he's not the lead, he doesn't need one, but then it's like, then why is he here? Because he doesn't really, Thor doesn't grow by the fact that Bruce is there. Here he's fine, like, he's funny and he works, and again, tone-wise, he works, not being angsty, I guess, about being the Hulk, okay, but he is playing it off kind of like a wide-eyed kid, almost like a lost little puppy for a little while. It's a little odd, again, because he doesn't start out that way, and there's no explanation. And again, if you're not also going to use his intelligence and be like, well, maybe his personality just kind of changed for no reason, but he's still the normal Bruce in some pieces, he's really not. It's just, it's really weird. Again, it's not like it's not even terrible. I'm not like, oh, I dislike it. Again, it's fine for what it is. It's just bizarre. It really just feels like they wanted another Avenger in the movie, they wanted the cool action scene, and they needed an excuse for him to not be in Civil War, because whatever team would have gotten him, hashtag Team Cap, would have, won. It's like, you would have easily won, because it's just like, no one's gonna fight that. And for anyone who would be like, well, Vision does nothing in that movie. It's like, come on, Hawkeye's able to incapacitate Vision for like 3 minutes. Come on, it's like, Hulk would kill him. But it just seemed like these two characters didn't, like Thor and Hulk, could not be in Civil War. Like, they cannot be in it. Whoever has them is gonna win. So they had to keep them out. It's like, okay, Thor being out made sense. Like, he could be off doing missions and stuff. Hulk being out didn't make any sense. Because you know if he'd been on Earth and had heard about what was going on, he would have gone to help. Or at least try to talk sense into Tony after what had happened with Ultron. It is just really, he's very oddly utilized in this film. I mean, you guys might correct me. Again, I only saw it once and a lot happens in it. That's why I took 2 days to really think and process it, and I'm still rambling about things. But it really seems like if they had needed to write him out, whether it be the actor was busy or they couldn't afford the extra effects, whatever, they could have done it. I think they could have written him out and it still would have been funny and the story still would have worked. Thoughts on the film as a whole? Most of the characters, well, all the characters enjoyable for sure in their roles, and about 95% of them useful in doing something important, and make sense, and are consistently grow and change, and the new ones all make sense and have reasons to be there. It sets up a little bit for Infinity War, not as much as I would have thought, and we'll get into that starting right now. We will start the spoilery section. This is like very light. I won't even really consider this a spoiler. Something that I just found really interesting. We're still missing the 6th Infinity Stone, and I thought that was going to be a huge part of what this movie was. I thought Hela was going to have it, and that's why she was so powerful. I mean, she's the goddess of death. I'm like, she has an Infinity Stone, that's why she can do that kind of thing, but she doesn't. It's not even in it. Thor says at the very beginning of the movie that he spent the last 2 years, while he wasn't in Civil War, looking for the Infinity Stones and searching the realms and things like that, and he found none, and I was like, because they mentioned it at the beginning, I'm like, okay, yeah, because Hela has one, and that's where he's going to get it. It's not brought up again, just didn't happen. The only other one it could be in is Black Panther, because that's the only movie in between this now, and I guess that makes sense, because Wakanda looks so amazing and developed and really cool, and that would explain why it's, like, really, really, like, more prosperous than any other place, and more advanced than any other place on the face of the earth. Makes sense if it was powered by an Infinity Stone somehow. It's really interesting, and I hope they mention this in Infinity War, that there is clearly something special about Earth in this series. It's like, almost everything is about the Earth. It's like 4 out of the 5 Infinity Stones we have so far have been on Earth. The only one that hasn't was the orb from the first Guardians. Even stuff like Star-Lord's dad gravitated toward Earth for some reason. Earth was the thing that worked. How come Earthlings were the only species where that whole thing in Guardians 2 would work? You know, Thor, in his first movie, why did Odin choose Earth to ban Thor 2? It's like, it's really odd. Like, things just gravitate toward the Earth in this series, which is pretty interesting, and I wonder if they're going to bring that up, because if 5 of the 6 stones are on Earth, seriously, because that stone is the only thing at all that keeps the Guardians. The Orb Stone is the only thing that connects the Guardians to this world at all. Same thing with Doctor Strange and his, even though he's on Earth, is like his Infinity Stone in his first movie was the only thing that connected him to this universe at all. Speaking of which, actually, that's actually a good segue into what I want to touch next. Doctor Strange's scene. Perfect. I've seen that movie twice, and it came out only a year ago. But it's like, I already forgot how much I really enjoyed his character, because Benedict Cumberbatch is like such a talented guy, just such a good actor. And I can talk, it's an even better segue than I thought, because I can talk about one of the character archetypes Marvel got better about writing, and that is the arrogant jerk that gets a solo movie that learns a lesson. They do that twice in the first phase. Iron Man and Thor have the exact same story, like character arc story, in their first movies, being like, I'm an arrogant jerk and I can get away with whatever and everybody loves me or whatever, and then they get thrown into a terrible situation and have to learn to deal with it and to be a better person, blah blah blah. You've seen that a million times. It's the Emperor's New Groove, but not as fun. I think part of that is just Benedict Cumberbatch's raw talent is just, he's able to play a jerk so, but it's like, you know, if you watch Sherlock, he plays like such a sociopathic jerk, but it's still really fun to watch. And it's the same with Doctor Strange. Even when he's been a complete jerk, you're still okay watching it. And I think it's like, he was one that was played the least for laughs of the 3, because Robert Downey Jr., of course, is going to be, you know, smug and smarmy, have his quips and one-liners and ad-libs and stuff like that in his movie, and Thor, it played off the whole, oh, it's a fish out of water story too, because he's on Earth and he doesn't know Earth things work. So they had like those hooks to them. Doctor Strange, it's like, there are funny parts in that movie for sure, but it's like, he is not like overall a comedic character, especially when he's a jerk. And so I thought that was interesting. He could get like smug and smarmy too, but like nowhere near the extent that Tony Stark does. So it's his comedic part was played down, which if anything you'd think that'd make it worse, but I think it actually made it better. And his movie is really good. He has one of the absolute best solo movies, and definitely one of the best intro movies out of any of the characters in this universe so far. It's fantastic as a standalone film. And the visuals are like beyond stunning in that movie. Like, oh my goodness. But he's really good. We got an Infinity Stone out of it too, which I thought was really awesome. We got the time travel and alternate realities, which I love so much in his stuff. One of the coolest parts of the whole movie, though, was that end credit scene where he's talking with Thor, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, he's gonna talk with Thor, and they explained, like, you know, end of Thor the Dark World, Loki's still alive and Odin's gone, what happened? And then, you know, you get the end credit scene to Doctor Strange. It's like, Thor knows where Loki is, and he's trying to find out what happened to Odin. What? And so having that scene in this movie play out, you get to see the whole scene now. That's a super fun scene, by the way. It was very plot heavy. Doctor Strange, though, I purposefully, there was a clip of that scene. I don't know how much of the scene it is, but that he is only in the one scene. But my sisters watched it. I purposefully did not, because the only scene I knew for sure he would be in is that one. And I was right. That was the only scene he had. And I was like, I hope he has more than one, but he probably won't, and he didn't. Because I really wanted to be able to look forward to his stuff and see what they were going to do with this character going forward, and having him interact with the other heroes. And I think he's going to fit in really well with, like, the group in Infinity War. I think he's going to work really well and be really fun to watch with interacting with everybody. And it's really cool because he's one of the only humans, technically, I think he's the only human who is, like, fully into the magic way over the science stuff. Technically, Scarlet Witch kind of is, and Vision, because they're made with the Infinity Stone, Like, that's what gave her powers, and that's what makes Vision. But it was also science that made that magic work. With Doctor Strange, he just has magic. So I think that's a fun thing. And I thought him, having a moment with Thor worked really cool for that. And so I'm excited to see where his stuff goes. I wish he'd been in a little bit more, because it is convenient. I know it's probably just to remind everyone Doctor Strange is actually in the same universe as these guys, because he didn't meet anybody in his movie, and that's fine. But I think it was kind of just there to remind you that he exists, and to be like, hey, Thor, here's some convenience for you. I wish he could have been in at least one more scene, even if it had just been a joke scene, like near the end or something, or in the end credits or something. And, oh my gosh, the Sherlock references. That was amazing. When he sees the address, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that's a great reference. But the music had that Sherlock sound. Like, yes, that's probably the best thing of Sherlock we've gotten out of the last few years. In the fourth season, we don't talk about the fourth season here. Okay, the twist in the first act, if you don't want to know, I'm sorry, but I couldn't believe this wasn't all over Twitter or something, at least where I saw it, which is that Hela is their sister, is Thor's sister. It's just Odin's like the worst father ever, because he did the same thing with every single one of his kids. He just used them for his own glory, and that was it. He used Hela for his own glory, and when he's like, I don't want to do this anymore, he just exiles her when technically she did nothing wrong, because if he was okay with her doing it for like a millennium and then just banishes her because he doesn't want to do it anymore with like no explanation. What? Who does that? And then same thing with Thor in his movie. Instead of being like, Thor, you need to not be so arrogant, he's like, I banish you to Earth forever, whatever. And then same thing with Loki. He just takes this baby and is like, I'm gonna adopt you to be a trophy. It's like, what? Odin's a terrible person. And he does have good moments. He actually has one of my favorite lines and points of the entire movie. It does not redeem him for all he's done in these movies, but I will give him this. When Thor loses his hammer, which is, even though you see it coming, like, if you've seen the trailer, you know that happens. It's the first thing you see in the trailers. But, dang, it's still intimidating when that hammer breaks. But I like how Odin's like, are you the god of hammers? It's like, no, you're the god of thunder. And I'm like, yes! You don't need, he doesn't need his weapon. He can play to his strength. And I like that they played up when a god is using what they're the god of. That is when they're at their best. That's why Hela's the best when she's, maximizing the casualties and death. That's why Thor's the best when he's doing thunder. That's why Loki is literally only successful when he can be mischievous. It was interesting to see that, but I really liked that point. That's like, that's not even your superpower, dude. And I think in the Thor movies, that was always a complaint I had about Thor's character in general. When he uses thunder and lightning, it's super cool. But he doesn't do it that often. And I was like, well, it's Thor, and lightning is what, like, I don't know how Marvel, I'm sure it's expensive the way they do it for sure, but lightning is actually one of the cheaper on the visual effects side of things. So I'm like, come on, you can do that. There was some destruction, some deaths, that don't hold that much weight, but you still feel bad when they die. It's not characters that we were close to, but you are kind of like, oh, that guy died. I was like, oh, I didn't expect that to happen. Especially not as fast as it did. So the relationships in this movie get kind of interesting. The Thor-Loki relationship, like I said, I think is really good, because Loki still seems to underestimate Thor's ability to learn and adapt, whereas Thor has learned and adapted to Loki and actually, gets the better of him at some points. And I'm like, that's really good. That's really good character growth on Thor's part and on their relationship as a whole, to where Loki's gonna have to learn to either completely work with Thor or to adapt. And that's one thing my dad and I were talking about the other day, which is Loki needs to fully decide who he's gonna be. And I'm like, I assume they're going anti-hero route with him, which is kind of what I figured in the first place. But like, once he survived Avengers, like, oh, he's in Thor 2, I'm like, he's gonna be an anti-hero at some point, like, officially. I don't think they'll kill him in Infinity War. He's obviously gonna be in it, he has to be, but I don't think they'll kill him. I think not only is he too popular, but I mean, you've done the whole, like, Thor to Dark World just did it, where you're like, oh, Loki's a good guy, oh, he's dead, no, he's not. So I hope that he lives through Infinity War, not just because I like the character, but I think that makes more sense, because they've played that card so much. So but he does need to decide, are you going to be an anti-hero and work with the Avengers and with your brother, especially if it's in your best interest now, and kind of just to save yourself? Or are you just always going to do, what benefits you, just so we know? His motivations need to be clear. He needs to finally finish, like, coming into his own. I think we're finally getting that, which is good. And, I mean, Loki's always been enjoyable and developed a little bit, but I think now he needs to finally come to terms with that. Okay, speaking of relationships, so, Thor sees that the Hulk is there, wants to calm him down into being Bruce again, tries doing that whole weird hand thing that Black Widow magically knows how to do in Age of Ultron. We never get to see how it happens. It's never even really explained how it happens. You just figure it out one day and just, okay, I mean, really, you'd think at that point they try to figure out a special method for everyone to calm the Hulk down, because he's not always going to be there when they use him. It's like, maybe Cap should know, maybe Tony should know, maybe Thor should have one, maybe Clint should have one, just everyone should have had something to calm him down. I don't know how they came up with that. It's dumb. And he's really trying to get him to turn back into Bruce, and Hulk's like, no, I don't want to be. Everyone hates me back on Earth. I'm just gonna stay here and be the Hulk. Finally, Thor is like, no, I need to get that ship that you came here on that magically is still okay after 2 years. I was so mad with how they got him to turn back to Bruce. They get into the ship that Bruce took to get there, the Hulk took to get there in the first place. I always thought it was so dumb how he leaves on that, like, jet thing as the Hulk at the end of Ultron. I'm like, dude, it's Jekyll Hyde, it is contrast. The Hulk is an idiot. That's the point. Is like, Bruce is a genius, whereas the Hulk can barely string sentences together. He can barely speak in those first two Avengers movies. So it's like, how at the end of that second Avengers, he, like, flying by himself and knows how to work the plane, suddenly remembers all, like, the controls and stuff. It's the freaking, what gets him to finally turn back into Bruce is, something gets hit or pulled in the plane thing as he's trying to get Thor to stay and not leave, to go off planet. And the message from Black Widow from the end of Age of Ultron, where she tries to tell him to, like, oh yeah, turn your plane around and come back to us or whatever, plays, and I'm like, but that wasn't even a recording. Like, first off, like, okay, let's even say the ship records everything. Fine. First of all, convenient. They're just like, hey, I pull this one thing and it's exactly what I need to see right now. It's like, plot convenience theater welcomes you. But I don't even mind plot conveniences and contrivances if it is entertaining or if it serves the story in a way that isn't like a Deus Ex Machina huge way. He sees Natasha on the screen and turns back into Bruce, and I'm like, what? Like, what? The Natasha Bruce thing was the weirdest, weakest part. It, like, ruins so much of that movie, and it just ruins Bruce's character completely. Age of Ultron, he is nothing but a pawn. Tony uses him twice, and he's just such an idiot. And it's like, Bruce, Mr. 7 PhDs, you could have used one of those to be like, Tony, you're insane, and just not done anything. And instead, you helped, and because of that, you're, like, even more accidentally murderous than you have been the last several years. Then it's like him being in love with Natasha doesn't make a lick of sense. The Phase 2 romances definitely work better than Phase 1. Thor and Jane didn't work. That was something I wanted to mention, by the way. Jane is, like, just thrown out in one line of dialogue. Done. Okay, works for me. I didn't like her that much to begin with. Iron Man and Pepper has never worked for me. The only one that worked early on was Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter. We don't have any real romances that work, that can be steady until Phase 2. Gamora and Star-Lord work because they're in, like, a couple scenes per movie maximum, with that being brought up at all. And in Guardians 2, it's a plot point, but they made sure, like, it stayed in its lane. You know what I mean? The romance did not overtake the story at all. In Ant-Man, I was gonna say, though, also to compliment Ant-Man for, like, the millionth time in my life, Scott and Hope's romance works because it's, like, non-existent till literally, like, the last 5 seconds of the movie. But I think that works really well because you've had the entire movie to see them have to work as have to develop their relationship as friends and become a team. They were not just like, oh, I'm attracted to you, but we have tension or whatever. It's like, no, it's like we need to to be a team, and she was really the one that wasn't willing. He was just confused, like, about what was happening at all, and then she was like, I don't like you, but it wasn't Scott's fault, it was because of what her father had done. Their relationship was already developed. And then you find out that they're kind of into each other, and I'm like, okay, I'm totally cool with that. And I also, they're both really good, fully fleshed out characters, and they complement each other in good ways. But it's like Bruce and Natasha do not complement each other in the slightest. Most likely, this is the case. I hope it's the case. Or Natasha's even a worse person for this. That she was told by Nick Fury, it has to just be him, because S.H.I.E.L.D. is disbanded at that point by the time Ultron comes along. But she was told by Nick Fury, you need to manipulate him emotionally and mentally. You need to get inside of his head, and you need to twist Bruce around so you have, like, control over him. When we need the Hulk, you can force him to do it, basically. Which is just evil. Like, it really is. Like, that is just terrible. Because it's like, hey, when worse came to worse in the Avengers, he chose to be the Hulk. Like, he knew when they needed help. That he's like, okay, I'll become the Hulk, it's time to do this now. But it's like, to force him, like, you're no better than Scarlet Witch in Ultron, where she is manipulated by Ultron to turn Bruce into the Hulk. And I'm like, okay, it's still awful. Like, she's still being a terrible person, and it's like, oh, she's doing her job or whatever. Fine, but it's a job that doesn't even make sense, because like I said, he will turn into the Hulk willingly if they genuinely need him. So it's like, why would you do that? And you already taught her the weird, sun's going down thing, so it's like, why? What's the point? She can turn it off, and he already will turn it on if you need it. What's the point of her controlling him? But here's the thing. The audience is not even given a hint. Not even a subtle little shred of a hint that she was being ordered to do this. That is a lot to expect an audience to infer if that's the case. She tells him her heart-wrenching backstory, not Captain America, who she spent an entire movie getting close to. Not that they have to be in a romantic relationship. Whether they do or not, I really don't care at this point with her and Cap. But it's like, you go through all this with Cap, and he's not the one that you tell your heart-wrenching story to. It's the dude who fell in love with you for no reason that we're given at all. That's another thing, like, that they're like, oh, you can infer this. Like, no, you can't. There's no reason for him to be attracted to her, and there's no way in heck she would be attracted. Why would someone as strong and, like, headstrong, you'd think she would want a more, not physically, but like assertively strong guy, where Bruce tries not to be that, because he can't. If he gets like that too much, it's gonna be bad. Because of how Ultron was the whole film to Bruce, the way it treats him, from Scarlet Witch, like, completely traumatizing him. Like, he looks more broken after being the Hulk in the first time in that movie than, like, ever in these films. It's like, he's like so distressed. So to almost immediately after be like trying to manipulate and force him to be the Hulk again is already rough. If she and Tony hadn't like twisted him around, and they hadn't written him to be such an idiot through the whole movie, again, for being like a genius, then maybe he could have just done what he was supposed to and choose to be the Hulk when they needed it. But instead, he's forced into it, and not only is he forced into it by her literally throwing him into, like, a well, whatever it was, this, like, crater, being like, you're gonna die if you don't turn into the Hulk right now. That is what triggers him into being the Hulk non-stop for 2 years. Bruce Banner ceases to exist for 2 years because Black Widow is awful to him. Outside of Ultron, I don't hate Black Widow, I just don't care. They try to make her better in Civil War, but by doing so, they also kind of write a few other people out of character, like when she's the last one with Cap at Peggy's funeral in Civil War, and I'm like, Sam was with Steve. Sam's not just gonna leave Steve at a funeral by himself. Sam wouldn't just leave him, if that's what you're implying, just so Black Widow looks better. It's like, no, you can't just keep writing people out of character for her. Please stop. please stop. And it's not even like, oh, this is a flaw she's gonna get over. No, she's still playing both sides and being manipulative, and that can come in handy. But like I said, even Loki, who was literally a villain, is now becoming an anti-hero, and I'm like, please pick a side now, Loki. But it's like, Black Widow's supposed to be a hero who's able to play the sides, but she's just terrible. I know, like, I'm saying that same thing over and over. I have been stewing on this for 2.5 years, though, guys. The only person that got, of the original Avengers, Scarlet Witch is good, and Quicksilver is good, but the only lead from the original movie that gets any development at all, good development, is Hawkeye. Thor and Cap are really just there as, like, window dressing. They're pretty much there because they have to be, but they don't really do anything. And the other three are just, they're shot all to heck. Tony's crazy for no reason. Black Widow is a terrible, manipulative person for no reason that the audience is given. And Bruce is like a shell. He is just an idiot shell to be used and manipulated by everyone. The only time in that entire movie he stands up for himself and is kind of his own person again is when Tony's like, help me build vision. And he's like, no, what did we just do? So, but that's it. Like, it's the only part where Bruce is like a person. What made me the most sad also about this whole thing, you could have had an amazing Thor and Bruce moment with Thor getting Bruce to turn back. Because in the Avengers, Thor is the only person who talks to the Hulk like a person and uses his real name and tries to snap him out of it when they're fighting on the helicarrier. Like, he specifically says, we're not your enemies, Banner. He's trying to get through to him, and none of the others do that. And that makes sense because Thor is the one that would be used to dealing with, like, creatures and monsters and stuff. Another thing about Valkyrie I really liked, first of all, she is the only character now that we've seen actually befriend the Hulk, like the Hulk itself, like as a person, because that's the only thing she knows him as for those 2 years. Doesn't even know that he's not just a beast. But then when Bruce turns back into Bruce, he doesn't remember her. She doesn't know who he is exactly. They feel like they know each other. I thought that was cute. But what I like is they kind of imply that Bruce might like her now. And I'm like, I'm cool with this. She's way more fun to watch, for me at least, than Black Widow is. She is fun. Her action scenes are really fun. She's really funny. She works really well with the rest of the cast. She works well with Mark Ruffalo if they did want to develop that. It's like, they were really awesome. It's like so cute because he doesn't even say it to her, but he's just talking to Thor. He's like, who is she, Thor? She's beautiful. And he's like really, really like just innocent about it. And it's really sweet. And I was like, that is like way more, he seems so much more genuinely attracted to her there than to Natasha in the entirety of Age of Ultron. Can we give Bruce this one thing, please? He literally just spent 2 years being a monster. Can Bruce have like 5 minutes of like being happy with something and not being used by somebody else? I'm sorry that this turned into basically an Age of Ultron rant for I don't know how long. To sum it up very well, what it did, it took a character who I adored, thought was fascinating and amazing, and just really, really, like a really meaty, interesting character that you had so much potential in Phase 1. Easily my favorite in Phase 1, just from being in just the Avengers. And now, it's like, he wouldn't even crack my top 5 anymore, guys. It's sad. It's sad. But, you know, we'll see where it goes from here. But Thor Ragnarok, great movie. Oh man. Again, I'm sorry this turned into nothing but like Age of Ultron is awful and here's why. Thank you all so much for watching and putting up with this. Let me know what you guys thought of Thor Ragnarok. I love talking to you guys about this kind of stuff and getting the different perspectives. So let's get that going, and again, thank you all so much for 500 subscribers. I definitely have a lot of content planned to come your way. I'm actually really busy because I'm working ahead on some videos, so my family's going on vacation this month to Disney World, and we're so excited. It's like Thor, if anything, just got us more pumped up. Like, my whole family is like, we need Thor merchandise now. So, but Thor Ragnarok, great movie. I hope you've all seen it. Anyway, thank you very, very much for everything, and I will see you guys later.